least they made me sound badass.
From everything I'd seen up to this point, Gotham Knights appeared to have all the makings of the ambitious, action-packed smash hit that it was clearly intended to be. I mean, who wouldn't want a new, co-op-centric take on Rocksteady's spectacular Batman Arkham games that's built for the current console generation? But then, as I played it for 30 hours, it just kept hitting me with bad news. Wham! Underwhelming combat. Pow! A weak, predictable story. Biff! Puzzling progression design choices. Thwack! Sub-30 frame rates. I'm left wondering how it went so wrong. Some good parts managed to shine through, like the impressive open-world Gotham sandbox, but its problems never let me enjoy the moment-to-moment crime fighting nearly as much as Bat Family fans deserve. Since Gotham Knights is Batman adjacent, we need to cover its origin story. Like Bruce Wayne, it was born to a well-respected and rich family. In this case, the four third-person action games in the Arkham series. That's not to say that this is a sequel to those games. WB Games Montreal decided to splinter off into a separate version of DC Comics canon, and in a lot of places it goes out of its way to chart its own vigilante-based course. But when you're stealthily grappling from ledge to ledge, crawling through ventilation shafts, and beating up groups of criminals in a rhythmic combat system, it's impossible not to compare it to the vastly superior Arkham games. One key difference is that here you get to play as your choice of the four mostly lovable heroes: Nightwing, Batgirl, Red Hood, and Robin, as you zip around in open-world Gotham, delivering justice to all manner of superstitious cowards and unraveling a troubling mystery in the iconic city's murky streets. That mystery revolves around the death of none other than the Batman himself, which serves as a solid kicking-off point for a new generation of crime fighters to take the spotlight. In the wake of the Dark Knight's demise, Bruce Wayne's ragtag gang of current and former sidekicks step into the fray to fill his formidable shoes, and serves as a strong premise to what ultimately turns out to be a lackluster story full of foreseeable twists and unsurprising turns. As various criminal elements rush in to fill the power vacuum left by Batman, the ancient order known as the Court of Owls supposedly becomes the biggest threat facing Gotham, even if they don't live up to that threat in practice. I quite like the Court as an enemy within the pantheon of Batman rivals, but for a secret society that's supposed to have pulled the strings of Gotham's leaders for hundreds of years, it's pretty amusing that they never really exert that power, even as a group of young adults easily foil their plans with a pocket full of gadgets and a couple karate moves. I kept wishing that their far-reaching influence and resources would be wielded in a way that would give me a reason to fear them, but they couldn't be bothered to do more than send some well-dressed goons after you and shake their fists as you infiltrated their ranks. They just never pose any kind of threat, instead serving as punching bags for you to take out your aggression on the caviar-guzzling, bow-tie-wearing, eyes-wide-shut upper class. The oddly brief campaign is padded out with busy work, but the story's biggest issue is that it tries way too hard to squeeze an entire rogues gallery of potential suspects into its murder mystery premise, and feels completely disorganized as a result. You spend most of the surprisingly short campaign's 8 story missions jumping from one villainous cabal to another, before arriving at a conclusion I was able to predict practically before the end of the opening credits. It's devastating to see such an underwhelming plot unfold after the Arkham series included some of my favorite Batman stories of all time, which often left me speechless with their stirring twists and turns. Gotham Knights, by contrast, includes a masked character whose identity is immediately apparent upon first sight, and whose inevitable unmasking is laughably anticlimactic. It's followed up with an ending that's foreshadowed so frequently and unsubtly that I involuntarily cringed when they actually went through with it. It doesn't help that the oddly brief campaign is padded out with busy work, like repeated sections where you have to wander around Gotham interrogating a string of different criminal factions headed by everyone from Harley Quinn to Mr. Freeze to gather clues about the next story development, and side quests to unlock table stakes features like fast travel. That one has you visiting every part of the map to stand around and scan drones for no discernible reason. In between all those chores, you'll also have to contend with the RPG elements, and make the pacing even more of a drag than it already is. Even if you are just running around Gotham aimlessly, or tackling minor crimes, though, exploring the city can at least be a highlight. It may not get a lot right, but WB Games Montreal succeeds at capturing the fantasy of exploring a crime-ridden city as a caped crusader, and I spent hours just grapple hooking around and exploring the area. Doing so with a friend is also rewarding, especially since there are no limitations for how far you can be from one another. You can fight together or split up to search for clues to unlock the next main mission, or tackle optional quests twice as fast as you'd be able to do on your own. It's really nice to not be tethered to another player when you join their world, especially if you're like me and don't enjoy playing the role of the sidekick who can't peel off to investigate when I get easily distracted by shiny objects in the distance. It's fortunate that each of the 4 protagonists are fairly likable and well written too, and there are plenty of amusing quips to help you get through the letdown of a plot. Sure, Red Hood mostly just keeps talking about how he died that one time like the edgelord that he is, and Robin the Tim Drake version swings wildly between being deeply depressed by his mentor's death and making silly jokes. But it's still impressive that these B-listers and sidekicks manage to step up to the plate as much as they do. They've all had their own stories in comics and TV shows, but few that hold a candle to Batman's. That said, glitches do occasionally cause otherwise touching story moments to instantly transform into comedies. Like one cutscene where Jason Todd's hoodie drawstrings decided to defy gravity and threatened to poke his friend's eyes out during a tense conversation. Combat in Gotham Knights is one of the worst parts about it. It's also neat how well Gotham Knights' story adapts to you playing whichever character you want, since you can switch between any of the 4 protagonists in between missions. Different versions of each cutscene are required, complete with character-specific dialogue depending on who you've selected to play as, with a few exceptions where certain scenes don't make much sense if you played someone else in a previous mission. It's great that the script recognizes whose butt-kicking boots I'm wearing during different moments. Really, my only major complaint with swapping characters is that each character has to unlock their abilities and be geared up individually, so the longer I played as one the less feasible it was. To actually switch to someone else, I'd have to stop making progress to catch up one character and unlock all their special abilities before proceeding. What good is the ability to switch characters when doing so means going back to square one and having to grind XP and gear all over again? Look, I'm no stranger to grinding. I'm a Destiny 2 fan after all. But what Destiny 2 has that Gotham Knights doesn't is great combat that I come back to for the fun of it, not just the rewards. Unfortunately, combat in Gotham Knights is one of the worst parts about it, and that's not a great thing to have to say about a game that's virtually all about combat. It's not the worst thing I've ever played, but if you were hoping for a return to the smooth, incredibly fine-tuned brawls of the Arkham series, you're in for a rude awakening when you're smacked in the face with the simple and underwhelming substitute that sits at the center of this disappointing adventure. Playing as these heroes offers some cool playstyles and abilities with which to fight, and yet, those options almost always take a backseat to mashing the same buttons until everything is unconscious. The oversimplification of combat is perhaps best exemplified by the complete absence of anything resembling the Arkham game's counter system, an omission that still baffles me even after completing it. At its best, dishing out justice is merely boring as you repeat the same attacks and wait for your special ability meter to charge up and enemy health bars to whittle down. Yes, they have health bars over their heads. At its worst, it's actively frustrating as you're hit by attacks that seem almost impossible to dodge and don't feel like you have full control of your character. Fighting crime hasn't felt this unsatisfying since before Arkham Asylum revolutionized it in 2009, and since you'll spend a lot of time doing it, this tragic shortcoming is like a deep cut on the roof of your mouth that just refuses to go away. As I played, I kept hoping Gotham Knights would introduce more mechanics later on in the campaign and things would eventually evolve and feel better. It never did. Combat may never become interesting, but I can at least give it credit for the diversity of options available to you. Since there are 4 playable characters, you can opt to be a hulking, DPS-focused, gun-toting maniac with Red Hood, or a stealthy, tech-hacking egghead by playing Batgirl. Stealthing around with Robin to take out enemies quietly is a markedly different experience from playing Nightwing, who specializes in dancing around the map and buffing allies. And that means you can pick the character that best suits your playstyle and customize it to your liking. As a Robin main, I maximize stealth partially to minimize time spent in bland combat, and leveled up my ability to apply status effects to enemies. While my co-op partner played Batgirl and transformed her into a tanky beast who could take a beating and revive herself after getting down.